Hello. Here's a follow-up video and gear update to my previous Phase 1 Arcane Mage guide. I've played the expansion 8 hours a day since launch, and have learned many additional things about Arcane Mages during my play, and wanted to clear up some confusion from my previous video. In my current gear, without raid buffs or consumes, I have roughly 700 Intellect, 400 Spirit, 850 spell damage, and 19% crit. This results in me bursting for 1.6k during Icy Veins and Arcane Power Window, doing 1.1k spamming Arcane Blast without cooldowns, doing 810 DPS during my conservation phase, and doing 700 DPS just spamming Frostbolts, which you should never do if you have Spirit on your gear. Playing in the background will be a clip of a burst phase and a clip of a conservation phase. The first update I have is Bangle of the Endless Blessing. I tested this trinket in dungeons in Kara, and the uptime of the 15% mana regen proc isn't enough to justify a slot in your gear. The uptime is around 20% of the time, which could be simplified to say 3% of your mana will regen in combat all the time, which is around 20 MP5. Also, the on-use effect has an uptime of around 10%, which gives over 100 MP5 during the use, but averages out to 15 MP5. Thus, the trinket averages out to 35 MP5, which is solid, but a spell damage on-use trinket is so good while being used with DPS cooldowns, it's hard to justify. The Alchemy trinket still stays because it is OP. Next item is talking about gem sockets. Due to the mana regen metagem Insightful Earthstorm Diamond requiring 2 red, 2 blue, 2 yellow, your sockets should have 2 spell damage spell crit orange gems, 2 spirit gems, and 2 intellect gems. If you have additional sockets, use these same 3 gems for those sockets to get the gem bonuses. Going full spirit gems doesn't seem worth it since raid fights last 2 to 4 minutes and your other gear has spirit on it. Next, I will talk about the conservation phase, which is currently playing in the background. The conservation phase of 3 Frostbolts and 3 Arcane Blasts works specifically because your first of 3 Arcane Blasts will be casted with the cast speed of 3 stacks, but only cost the mana of a 0 stack Arcane Blast because the debuff falls off as you are casting the spell. This is only possible when you are not affected by other spell haste effects like Icy Veins and Hero, because if you cast too fast, the Arcane Blast debuffs won't fall off during your cast. The last update I have before talking about some confusion people are having is gear upgrades. I've noticed that upgrading from Dungeon Blue gear to Kara Epics really doesn't do that much. You might get 4 more Intellect, 5 more spell damage on your gear, but this is very small compared to having the right stats on your gear. Thus, as you can see by my gear, I am still using Incanter's Helm, Shoulders, and Chest because it is way better than anything else besides T4 pieces, which will be hard to come by in the first few weeks and will likely go to your Hunters and Warlocks. Enchanting and gemming your gear is a much larger upgrade than going from Blue Dungeon gear to non-ideal statted Epic gear. Now, to clear up some questions people are having in my previous video about Spirit, it seems like a lot of people were very skeptical about that suggestion. So here's the logs of Prince. I use Prince because it is a pretty much sit there and range DPS fight. I click the top 7 Arcane Mages, and we will see their logs. So here's the first person. The fight lasted 2 minutes and 25 seconds, and he received 2 innervates because he does not have Spirit on his gear. So in the first 40 seconds, he went required an innervate. He went again at a minute 20 in, required another innervate, and then he went at like a minute 40, and he had to evocate. So he went 3 times in a single fight, and the fight was only 2 minutes and 20 seconds long, because he didn't have any Spirit. So he required innervates to have this log, which 95% of people do not have. Let's look at the next person. He required an innervate. Let's look at the next person. He required an innervate. The next person. He required an innervate. 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 Now on the 7th log is the first time a person did not receive an innervate. But again, the fight was 2 minutes and 13 seconds long, which 99% of people will not be killing Prince in that fast of a time. So mana really isn't that big of an issue, so you don't need Spirit on these short of fights. But if you look at his raid comp, again, He has a Disc Priest that's giving him a Spirit buff, which is very beneficial, because Spirit is good. He's got a Shadow Priest, which is the best class for giving MP5. And then he's got additional other great buffs, like Mana Totem. So, yes, you do not need Spirit on gear if you have Innervates, or if your kill time is 213. I'll finish off this video with some heroic boss kills, and I'll be recording my Kara run next reset since my gear is in a fairly good spot to show a good example of what Spirit gear looks like in longer boss fights. So subscribe for that notification. Thanks.